Week 17 of the fantasy football season, and if you made it to your championship, congratulations. So here's a few quarterbacks I would start this week. Time of recording this video, none of these guys have been placed on the COVID or protocol list. The first guy, Joe Burrow of the Cincinnati Bengals. So last week in week 16, what a ball game it was for Joe Burrow. One of the best performances for a quarterback in fantasy football this year. So the last few games here for Joe Burrow. Week 14 versus the San Francisco 49ers, 348 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 rushing yards. Week 15 at Denver, 157 pass yards, a touchdown, 25 yards rushing. And Week 16 versus Baltimore, monster game, 525 pass yards, 4 touchdowns, and 11 rushing yards. So right here, good matchup paper-wise for fantasy teams versus the Kansas City Chiefs that give up the 9th most fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season. But right here, I think this could be a close game. I know the Chiefs over the last few weeks here, they've been pretty much blowing teams out for the most part of the season here. But I think in this one, it could be a close game. I could also see a shootout between these two teams. And to be honest, Cincinnati plays way better at home than they do on the road. So I think Burrow in this ball game, he could go for 250 to 300 yard range with 2 or 3 touchdowns because he has great weapons, no doubt, with Jamar Chase, obviously, T. Higgins, who's emerged over the last couple weeks here, and even Tyler Boyd, who's been back in the mix and making plays. I like Burrow as a start this week. The second quarterback's Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles. So Hurts here, he came back a few weeks ago after getting injured in that New York Giant game, and he's looked pretty good here. And he versus the Washington football team in Washington here in Week 17. So the last few weeks since he returned from injury was Hurts. Week 15 versus same Washington defense, 296 pass yards, a touchdown, and into 38 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, a fumble loss. In Week 16 versus the Giants, 199 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, and 7 rushing yards. So the Washington football team gives up the most fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season. We just saw Dak Prescott and that Dallas Cowboy offense beat them on Sunday Night Football, putting up 56 points in that game. So Jalen Hurts, I think he could have a similar ball game like he did in Week 15 versus Washington. And he's a big start this week at the quarterback position. The next quarterback I would start is Kirk Cousins of the Minnesota Vikings. So I know it's another primetime ball game here for Kirk Cousins, which he hasn't been good throughout his career. And that's the knock on him. But he's got a good matchup on paper at Green Bay that gives up the 7th most fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season. So the last few games here for Cousins, Week 14 versus Pittsburgh, 216 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 win those 14 rushing yards. Week 15 at the Bears, 87 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, and into 10 rushing yards. And then Week 16 versus the Los Angeles Rams, 315 pass yards, a touchdown, an into, and 17 rushing yards. So right here, he's got a good matchup on paper, like I mentioned. But this is a ball game here where I could see the Minnesota Vikings trailing early and often versus high-powered Green Bay offense and the number 1 seed right now in the NFC here. In the last matchup between Green Bay and Minnesota, Kirk Cousins had an amazing fantasy day, and they even won the game, Minnesota, in Week 11. 341 pass yards Cousins had, 3 touchdowns in that one. So I don't think his numbers will be that high, but I think he could get 280, 290, 2 or 3 touchdowns with an interception in this one. And he's a quarterback I definitely would start this week. And it looks like Adam Thielen might be playing after all, after he left the ball game early in Week 16 with his ankle injury. The next quarterback's Russell Wilson of the Seattle Seahawks. So Russell Wilson, he's been decent the last 3 out of 4 weeks here for fantasy owners. Week 14 at Houston, 260 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, 8 rush yards, a 2-point conversion. Week 15 at the Rams, 156 pass yards, and an into. In Week 16 versus the Bears in a game where it snowed a lot, 181 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, 13 rushing yards. So right here, Week 17, another good matchup versus the Lions, who obviously can't stop anyone. Seattle's at home once again, where Wilson's had his better games this season here. And I think he puts up a big number, and he's a quarterback that is a must-start this week, and the 5th and final quarterback, Jones of the New England Patriots. So Mac Jones here, he's been up and down so far in his rookie year, but that's what you expect from a rookie quarterback in his first season in the NFL. So the last few games here for Jones, Week 13 at Buffalo, where the winds were outrageous, 50 to 60 mile per hour winds, 19 pass yards. Week 15 at Indianapolis, 299 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 win those. And then Week 16 versus Buffalo, a tough defense, 145 pass yards, 2 win those, and 33 rushing yards. But this week here, the only reason I'm recommending Mac Jones is with a great matchup versus the Jacksonville Jaguars that stopped nobody. We just saw Zach Wilson have a huge game versus them. And I think Jones this week, more in deeper leagues, he's more of a start. But it wouldn't surprise me to see him have anywhere from 20 to 25 fantasy points. So that's a few quarterbacks I would start here for Week 17 of the fantasy football season.